Hello, today I'll be walking from the side of the old A1 in an area known locally as Selby 4 to a small community called Ledston Luck, 2 miles away. It's quite an inauspicious start. The road was built in the 1960s and took traffic from London to Edinburgh. It was superseded maybe 10 or 20 years ago by a 6-lane road a few hundred metres to the east. The road's quieter now and it's used by trucks and cars as a rest area. It is the highest ground around though, so there are good views to the east of the Yorkshire Wolds and to the northeast of the Hambleton Hills. But after clambering down a steep banking, I crossed a freshly planted field of peas and headed towards a dip in the land with a gap through some trees. The reason I like to walk and start from this particular point is because maybe a quarter of a mile from the road you come into Ledsham Bank Nature Reserve, another one of the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust reserves. I first visited it a couple of years ago and I've been back often, and in every season. It is a delightful place. It's a narrow valley dropping quite steeply downhill. There is, I am told, a ridge of limestone that runs across the whole of the north of England down into the Midlands, and when left to woodland and grassland it creates a wonderful habitat for nature. The weather today is, well, I think, a typical English day. There's high grey and white cloud. It's about 15 degrees and there's a light breeze. I'll be walking through Ledsham Bank, which is a mile or so long, through the village of Ledsham, and then on through the fields and lanes to Ledston Luck. This was a mining community with a small number of houses associated with that. Now there are business units, a cafe, still the houses, but what makes it special is that it's also the site of another Yorkshire Wildlife Nature Reserve. So that's today's walk. This one in the summer is absolutely stunning. It has dozens and dozens of different varieties of wildflowers. The grass and flowers get to about 3 or 4 feet high, and it's just a sea of colour, insects, butterflies. It's early in the season, but there's still quite a lot going on. The ground gradually drops down from the road, and in the dip at the bottom is the small village of Ledsham. From here you can turn left and walk to the village of Fairburn and the Fairburnnings RSPB Nature Reserve. You can then walk round to Ledston, back to Ledsham. You can walk into Leeds, along the river. There are endless walks in this area. But for today I'll turn right and walk through Ledsham and then out the other side. Looking back from the entrance to the reserve at the Ledsham end, it's clear that it's a steep valley that twists to the right as it goes up to the higher ground. Woodland on the right and the grass banking on the left. A small track takes you down to the road and then on into Ledsham, which is a pretty village built mostly of stone with a lot of very old properties. The passage through Ledsham is a brief one, as it is only a small place, situated on the eastern edge of West Yorkshire, where it meets the county of North Yorkshire. There's an old barn at the side of the road, attached to a farm. The church, which I don't know the exact date, but I think I once read it's the oldest building in West Yorkshire. Parts of it are 1,000 years old. And then there's the Checkers Inn, which was always famous because as it didn't have a licence to open on a Sunday. I think that may have changed now. Some anomaly of the ancient licensing laws. Heading through the village you come to a junction and there's a lane ahead called Park Lane. Follow that up past the houses and it soon comes out into open countryside with 2 tracks, one going right that would eventually take you to the village of Micklefield and one going left, which is our path today over to Ledston Luck. The path out of Ledsham climbs up at the other side. Ledsham, I think, is in a little hollow tucked out of the way. A real sleepy old world feel, like stepping back in time. And the track now climbs steadily, I think, up to Ledston Luck, which is at the side of another historical north to south road, a dead straight road that runs from Castleford all the way up through Micklefield and Aberford and links up with the new A1M that I was talking about earlier. This one's known locally as the Ridge Road, and I believe it was historically a Roman road. So I had thought a walk bounded by two nature reserves, but it's also a walk bounded by two north to south roads through the heart of England. This track's lovely now. There's a hedgerow with mature trees on the right hand side, and I think it looks like and a field planted with crops on the left. I think, is it wheat or barley? The path continues to climb uphill, soon becoming dead straight, well gravelled, with woodland to the right, called Long Plantation. To the left are well kept and fully planted fields, bounded by hedgerows and ditches. The ground to the right stays high now, goes to an area near Micklefield called Hookmore. Further across there's higher ground towards Bramham and Thorner. But to the left you start to get distant views, and the land seems to be dropping away. This is because we're on the edge of the Ayr Valley, and a mile or so to my left here is the bird reserve at Fairbanings. Further across to the right is Allerton by Water, St Aidan's, Rothwell, and then on into Leeds, a city that you could walk to its centre from here in no more than a couple of hours. After a long drag out of Ledsham, the land levels off. I've passed a farm on the right, and the well-made track gives way to a more overgrown track. I think the well-made track was for horses and horse riding. The path now still has open farmland on the left and another wood, Sheepcote Wood, on the right. To the west now, peeping over the horizon, are the Pennine Hills, probably over towards Huddersfield, maybe 20-30 miles away. And of course the hill I've just come up is we're in the foothills of that long chain that dissects England for 200 miles or more. The day couldn't be more different to the last time I did this walk. Can't remember if it was last summer or the summer before, but it was the hottest day of the year. Not a cloud in the sky. It was absolutely baking. And today, although as I say it was 15 degrees when I set off, in this wind at the top of the hills and with the cloud cover, it feels a lot colder. Just walking past the woods a few minutes ago, the whole of the air smelt of garlic wafting from the dark depths of the wood. I've just crossed a little footbridge and noticed a few years ago a plant didn't recognise, so I looked it up, and it's a species of the burdock plant, and there's absolute masses of it at the side of the track with its big leaves forming big clumps, a little bit like rhubarb. I think they used to make the drink dandelion and burdock from it, and I think they also made a kind of beer from it. I just disturbed a roe deer on the track about 200 metres ahead. I just saw the white rump disappearing into the woodland. The woodland here is lovely with some really old oak trees hanging over the path. I can see the Ridge Road now in the distance with cars travelling along it. I think the path continues to the road. I'm shortly going to be turning right into the woodland to take me to the nature reserve. looking for the path on the right, and then suddenly there it is, a dark hole in the hawthorn hedge. 2 pieces of timber across a ditch, and you're through into another world. The coal mine here closed just after the miners' strike in 1984. Coal mines had land associated with them, places where the spoil from the mining was tipped. And this isn't the biggest site, but still quite large. And as you come through the hedge, there's an area of woodland on the right hand side that is now looks to be fairly newly planted and is run by the Woodland Trust. And then the Nature Reserve that's run by the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust is further round behind the industrial units on what was the spoil heaps. The wood seems to be planted with mostly native deciduous trees. There are lots of oak, lots of beech, and in all honesty, hundreds of times I've driven past the old Ledston Luck village and the cafe and the industrial units. I never would have expected any of this. There's a sign at the far end that says "Welcome to Ling Close Wood," and that it's part of the Woodland Trust. There's a small footbridge and then a road, and then beyond that I can see the iron gate of the Nature Reserve. It's actually a farm track from the main road to a farm further inland. Once in the Nature Reserve, there's 2 paths. There's a set of steep steps going up onto the top of what was once the spoil heaps, but then a path going round the perimeter, which I'll follow to the far side and then begin my walk back. It's dark in here. There's a steep bank to my left, heavily planted with young trees, and a broad, thick hedge on the right. A beautiful, quiet place. As always, best not to let your imagination run away with you when in dark and lonely woodland. I should have gone up the steps. The path wasn't actually a path. It just petered out into a bit of a quagmire at the back of the hill, a foot deep in mud. So instead of safely going up a flight of steps, I'm now clambering up a steep hillside between the trees. Same result though. Brings me out onto the flat top of the spoil heap. Maybe 400 or 500 metres in each direction, 20 metres high. There's an information board provided by the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust in conjunction with Leeds City Council. Conservation grazing at Ledston Luck. In an effort to protect and maintain the beautiful wildlife on the site, we have installed livestock fencing, bridges, steps and way markers to provide safe rights of way to the public whilst the grassland is being grazed. There are drawings of Hebridean sheep, shorthorn cattle and Exmoor ponies. The development of agriculture has played an integral role in the shaping of the English countryside. Across England, most ancient woodlands were cleared to make space for crops and grazing animals in order to feed the ever-increasing population. Over time, the wildlife changed and adapted to these practices, creating new habitats and ecosystems, including grassland, meadows, moorland and heathland. Through years of study, it has been found that grazing is one of the most effective and sustainable ways to maintain these new communities and the rare species they are home to. Cattle, sheep and ponies are the most commonly used animals for conservation grazing. Grazing can benefit the diversity and abundance of grassland species. The animals control the competitive coarse grasses that can dominate the meadows by continually eating and removing them. This allows the finer, less competitive species to flourish, increasing the number of different grasses and flowers on site. By constantly eating, the grazing animals are removing nutrients from the grassland and soil, which is important because many wildflowers grow on nutrient-poor soils. Trampling by the heavy animals is also beneficial as it creates bare ground. This bare ground is brilliant for allowing seedlings to establish and is an essential part of the life cycle of many insects. Here at Ledston Luck we use conservation grazing to help control the encroaching scrub and weeds in an effort to keep the meadows free for wildflowers. The number of animals are kept low to avoid overgrazing the site and preserving the breeding grounds for the site's birds. The effectiveness of this management is under constant review to ensure the health of the site and sustainability of the project. Ledston Luck is part of a corridor of green spaces in the Lower Aire Valley in Leeds, which is owned by Leeds City Council and managed in partnership with the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust. And in front of me is a large, as I described, flat grassy area with a few silver birch. Beyond that and behind me is the trees and scrub that's not grazed. Again, it's a little early for the wildflowers. There are just the spring ones at the moment, but another couple of months and it's absolutely beautiful here. Sitting at the top of the hill by the meadow, I can look back to the east and just see through the trees as the ground falls away towards Ledsham. About a mile or so away is a plantation called Wellington Plantation, and then a series of plantations that go all the way back to the old A1. To the left and out of sight in the trees is the A63 as it heads out of Leeds towards the A1 and then on towards Selby and Hull. I remember being told at school that Yorkshire is on top of one of the largest coalfields in the world. It stretches from here across and under the North Sea and into Europe. When I was a child growing up, the county was renowned as a mining area, with pits not just in the areas you would expect them, with pits up to and into the city boundaries of Leeds. Times change and now there are no pits in Yorkshire. Just walking around the edge of the grassland at the top of the hill, I've seen my second orchids of the season. The first ones were a few weeks ago on the Cleveland Way. Saw some early purple flowering orchids. These beautiful little purple spikes just a few inches off the ground, my app tells me are marsh orchids. Really pretty flower. Seeing them has really made the day worthwhile. I'd hoped to see some in the Ledsham Bank Nature Reserve, but I think it's too early for the ones that they get there. But these are actually one of the prettiest ones I've ever seen. You can see the road now. I'm at the far northwestern side of the reserve, but I've just come upon the pond, which is maybe 75 metres across, half of it clear water, but then all around the edges are reeds and bulrushes. I disturbed a heron which has flown across the pond and is now flying back in towards the trees. This really is a lovely place. From here you're about a mile to Kippax, a mile to Garforth, both big suburbs of Leeds with thousands of people living there. But standing by this pond, apart from the traffic, you could be anywhere. I think the flag irises that are all out around the edges, the yellow ones. There's a couple of coots in the middle of the pond, and looking at the dark water, you can watch the reflections of the gulls flying overhead. I've climbed back up to the top of the old spoil heaps now, and in places where it's muddy or the grass and scrub haven't taken hold, it's very clear what this hill is made of. The ground is black, made up of waste. As this is a purely linear walk, I'm now leaving the hillside to start my return journey. I didn't used to like out and back walks, but nowadays I think they're okay. It is in effect a different walk. You're seeing everything from a fresh perspective. It's also later in the day and the weather's different. The grey skies are starting to clear as the sun comes out, and I have to be somewhere in 2 1/4 hours, and I'm not sure if that's going to be enough time to complete this walk. Hey ho. I found the steps this time. I don't really fancy scrambling down the way I came up. The only slight deviation of my route back is a small detour through the Woodland Trust wood. People have gone to all this effort to create it. It would be rude not to enjoy it. The path through the wood goes right up to the back of the houses and their very large gardens at Ledston Luck. It's a real interesting, big word alert, juxtaposition between a settlement and a nature reserve living side by side. But this is delightful. There are open areas amongst the young scrub and young trees of grassland. And now the sun has come out, the whole feel has changed. Butterflies appearing, insects appearing. Walking back along Long Plantation, the sun has fully come out now. It's a beautiful afternoon. The path side is dandelions, buttercups, clover, cow parsley. There's a red kite just to my right, high above the fields, silhouetted now against a white cloud. The gravel track's now given way to the nice path that came out of Ledsham, and now dropping downhill once more quite quickly. The open fields on the right, the woodland on the left, and all the colours now so much more vivid. The green of the crops, almost blue in the sun, and the green of the new leaves of the trees and the hedgerow, all set against the blue sky with high wispy white clouds. I'm back on the outskirts of Ledsham now, walking down Park Lane once more. I made good progress from Ledston Luck back to Ledsham, mainly so I take a seat in the churchyard. It's one of my favourite places to stop when I'm walking in this area. I just looked the church up actually on the internet. what makes it the oldest building in West Yorkshire is that it's been here since around 750. There's even mention of it around about 731, which is really mind-blowing that this church was here, possibly 350 years before the Norman conquest. I'm back at Ledsham Bank now, making my way uphill on the narrow path amongst the vegetation. The path climbs deeply, the valley runs down now to my right, all grassland, and then the woodland at the far side of the valley with another bank going up. The large proportion of flowers in this meadow are due out in a month or so's time, but there are some beautiful flowers. There's the little blue bird-eye speedwell, it's called, tiny little 4-petaled flower with a yellow centre, and there are large areas of a plant that's new to me. It's cruciata, smooth bedstraw, also known as crosswort. It's a tall yellowy green stem. And all these are growing together amongst buttercups. It really is beautiful. Just as you reach the head of the valley, you get a view that you don't get from the bottom as the valley twists to the right. But you can see away to my left, you can see up to the end of the reserve, and to the right to the bottom of the reserve. And in the distance, the whole of the Lower Air Valley and the Pennines beyond that. It is quite surreal though, because standing here in the middle of this gorgeous nature reserve, you can see the old A1 about half a mile further uphill with all the trucks parked at the side of the road. Would have been even more surreal when 100,000 vehicles a day would have been passing along it when it actually was the A1. I'll soon be back at my start point, so this seems an appropriate point to end today's podcast amongst the grass and shrubs and bird life of Ledsham Bank Nature Reserve. If you have enjoyed the podcast, please join me again next time. Tell your friends about it. But for now, as the nature reserve narrows all around me to the stile that is ahead of me, I'll bid you farewell.